You are listening to the On Purpose Podcast, your guide to living a more purposeful life. Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of the On Purpose Podcast, where, as always, it's an honor to serve you, and it's humbling to be able to share people's stories with our community around the world. And man, I never take that for granted. So I hope you know you are appreciated, and that when you come to this space, you know you matter, as my friend Zach Mercurio would say. All right, this week I am excited to interview somebody I've been following on social media for a while. He is tying together a lot of physical fitness and mental health awareness and packaging it really slickly on social media. And you know, if you've been listening to the show for a while, that I believe physical fitness and mental health go hand in hand, that you work them both together, because the brain is like a muscle too. You got to work it out to keep it sharp. So anytime I can talk to a guest that's doing those two things, and then tying it back to law enforcement, where we're protecting our first responders a little better, I'm all in. So I hope you sit back and relax and enjoy this week's episode with one of our newest friends coming to us from the Pacific Northwest, Eric Tung. But hold on now. Before you slide on over and start listening, help us out. Remember that we continue to grow through our listeners, through you all. So like, subscribe, share on any of the social media platforms you like to use. YouTube, where our short clips are. Over on Patreon, where you can subscribe and join with a membership if you choose. And help us fulfill our mission, which is to brighten the days of people around the world by sharing inspiring, thought-provoking, and purposeful content each and every week. Thank you all for being here. Enjoy the interview with Eric Tung. Eric, welcome to the On Purpose Podcast, my friend. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, Jerrod.
Man, it's an honor. It's just so fun to, we were talking a little bit off air. It's just fun to create something that brings a little bit of value to the world, wherever it is, and then to be able to share with other people to find you and to share their stories. So it's always an honor for us to be able to share the stories of the people around the world. So we thank you for being here.
Thank you, man. Yeah, it's my pleasure, certainly. And then even just to connect with you, we're in this day and age where, we can have our little positive efforts, but then to connect, across the nation. And I know you even connect outside, right? But just to see that, we can all be in this, in this greater mission together, just to create that positivity is really invigorating.
Yeah, I love it. What led you to wanting to do that? What led you? Because here's what. Let me preface that.
Yeah, man.
I believe everybody's story is worth telling, and I believe everybody's story there's somebody out there that needs to hear every story.
Mm-hmm.
So when did you realize that, like, man, I gotta get louder?
Man, it was a couple things. So, really, it was 2020, a shitty time for everyone. But as a cop, post death of George Floyd, we were all confused and frustrated, and the nation was reeling. I think the world was reeling, right? And I had my Facebook, I had my Instagram as more personal accounts. I never really put much on there. Didn't like hide it either. So people that knew me from life, school, whatever, knew I was a cop, probably loosely. We didn't directly keep in touch. But I used that as a method to vent, and I used it as kind of a journal, just to share my thoughts and what it feels like to be a cop that this just trying to do their best, right, and trying to recover the pieces and stay in the fight and try to serve continually in a positive way for the community. And I got a lot of positive feedback, right? There's a lot of people that really hadn't heard from me in years, that we haven't kept in touch, and you just kind of see your families kind of grow and develop, from the peripheral. But, I got a lot of kind of reach back saying, hey, like, thank you for sharing that. I don't really know any cops outside of you. And I think that you're exactly what we need more of. And I took that a couple ways, but largely not really as a compliment so much as I took it as like a wow factor of a disappointment that people that didn't have first responders directly in their inner circle or community didn't get that most first responders are like me, or even better than me. Like they're people that wear their heart on their sleeve. They're people that put others in front of themselves and their own health and their own families at times, unfortunately, I know that that's a lot of what we both talk about and share about, but I was like, man, if you only knew. And so then it kind of was a combination of that and just wanting to put out good, positive information for first responders as well as non-first responders of just like, hey, how can we just live a little bit better, but also show a little bit of that side of things, humanizing the badge, empathizing, just building that understanding that's going to help everyone along. And I've just become a lot more comfortable in the last couple of years. Part of it's based on assignment. I ended up becoming our recruiting sergeant, the first of its kind for my department. We never had that dedicated of an effort over the last just over a year. And so, telling my story is very intriguing to people coming into the job. So I've gotten very accustomed to ask what people's story is, why they have this call to service, and what mine was. And then just kind of growing the social from there, right? I'm trying to just go where the wind blows and where the thirst is, as far as the kind of content and where I can be most helpful to people.
I love it, man. I love it. But before we get too deep, I want to know about what led you to serving and how that's helping you as a family man. But before we get to that, Eric, I know you're a fitness guy. I've seen some of your workouts. I've seen you in the gi. I've seen you in the gi. So I know you're doing a little bit of jiu-jitsu.
I'm humbled. I'm trying. Yeah. I'm trying.
So like we don't just jump in and go live rolls in jiu-jitsu. We got to get you a warm-up. And On Purpose podcast is no different, Eric. So are you ready for your warm-up questions, my man?
I'm ready for the warm-up. We'll see.
All right, here we go.
I'll find out afterwards, I guess.
Dude, honestly, the warm-up questions are some of my favorite because it really gives me insight into people. So, All right, you're stranded on a deserted island. You get one food. What are you going to be eating the rest of your life, Eric?
Yeah, it's going to probably be ribeye steaks. And this is like, it's pseudo nod to the carnivore movement. I think I could do it if I had to. And man, you can't really beat that steak.
All right. Well, now I don't know how familiar you are with the show, but I had a very distinguished guest on a few episodes ago, and he also would take a ribeye steak. So now I need to know, how are you going to cook your ribeye steak?
I'll say, I kind of gross people out because I eat it pretty rare.
Okay.
Ribeye, I feel like, medium rare, more on the rare side is ideal. But yeah, some people are like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just efficient, man. trying to go green, not use too much energy to cook this thing.
Any seasoning? You got to go to seasoning on that ribeye?
For sure salt. But if it's good quality meat, like I'm good with just salt. I'll skip the black pepper a lot of times. Just a good quality, pink Himalayan or sea salt.
I love it. Yeah. All right. I'm now with that. All right. You get one superpower. What would you want and why do you want to have it?
I think I'd love to teleport. I love to travel. Don't do it quite as much as I'd like to. But the biggest drain is always the lag time, right? The travel time. So just to be somewhere. And then I kind of get in my own, I think, habit of trying to be productive. So if you can just get places faster and just get doing the thing, then it's fantastic.
There you go. Favorite book?
Ooh, what's jumping into mind is probably The Daily Stoic, Ryan Holiday.
Yep.
And what I like about it is just, it sits on my shelf in a prominent place. I've gone in and out of the habit of just kind of picking it up, and I'll read one or two entries. But just, for those unfamiliar, those, Greek philosopher and Roman philosopher, Stoic philosophers, just trying to help keep life simple, worry about what you can control. And he has a really good breakdown and just a really solid application to life.
Awesome. You get to have dinner with one person. They could be passed away or still with us. Who would you choose and what would you want to learn from them?
Man, I grew up loving Bruce Lee.
Okay.
He's as a Chinese American myself, like, you didn't really have a lot of awesome role models that like look like you. But yeah, just as I come to learn more, and I think a lot of people do appreciate his genius, not just as a martial artist or a celebrity, but as a philosopher, and just to pick his brain and kind of wonder how he, has he always been that way? Did he always look at the world just a little bit differently, a little bit non-traditionally? Because I think that innovation is really inspiring.
What specifically stood out to you in his thought process that made you connect with him?
Yeah, I mean, just little bits and pieces I've learned through the years. I feel like he was we don't think of as an underdog, but I think that there are so many haters and doubters in his life, and he was the first of his kind in many ways, right? The type of international fame, even the type of martial artist, and then a lot of MMA, pays its,
Yeah.
homage to him and just go throwing away the traditional. And that's something that, I try to apply even in my own life or careers. Like, man, we know as cops, we can't keep doing things the same way just because we've always done it that way. And the bureaucracy with that. And so just any of these free thinkers are super exciting for me to learn more about.
I love it. Free thinking. Yeah, that's where we should all try to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thinking for ourselves, thinking for what we need and what brings goodness to our world instead of just following the status quo over and over.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to break that paradigm at times. And I mean, you don't know what you don't know. And I'm sure there's so many limiting constraints that I just accept, right? And you got to put yourself under the microscope and ask others to do that too.
How do you do that?
Good question. I think self-checks are huge, but again, you have your own personal biases, right? And I think the best I can summarize it and the best I try to remind myself and others is you have to have your inner circle, those people that, your ride or dies, your friends, your partner, your spouse, what have you, your family, even professional colleagues that you've invited preemptively to call you out. If you're going a negative path, I have a specific example with being a newer cop where I got really cynical, and I had my friends, my college buddies, call me out, and I was resistant, right? But I've since then, I've invited them, like, hey, like if I ever start sounding an inkling like I did before, where this is all BS and people are all, all the criminals are, S heads or whatever, like check me, because that's not me, and that's not what why I'm doing this. So I think you have to invite it, but then you have to be willing to accept it when it comes, that criticism or that critique.
Dude, I love that. And that's one of the things I tell young people when they get into law enforcement, make sure you maintain those friends outside of it, because it's easy to get trapped right in that little circle you're talking about where you only view the world through the 10% of the people you interact with. And you forget the other 90% are like fantastic people that are doing exactly what they're supposed to do.
Yep. They just don't see the world. Luckily, fortunately, right? They don't see the world through this really strange, unnatural way that you see it, by design. But yeah, I 16 years ago when I came through academy, they did teach that concept, live outside the blue world, for law enforcement. And I hope it's commonplace now. I don't know if it is, everywhere in the nation, but it's more of what we need is those discussions, remember your life outside as well.
Yeah. Talk to me about your call to serve. What led you to this line of work and being willing to sacrifice for the greater good?
Yeah. I mean, at face value, it was I say later in life, but I wasn't like growing up wanting to be a cop, but it was in college, a lot of trying these kind of courses, looking at this major, just trying to figure out where my place was. And there's little hints when I psychoanalyze or I look back at my life, like little hints of the service that always fascinated me. Military service was really intriguing to me. ROTC, things that I thought about getting into and I wasn't necessarily supported to do so. But, ultimately, when you're an adult and about to graduate, I think it was my junior year where I was really doing that soul searching. I was like, I'm not motivated by money. I did, the painting business thing and in my summers at school, and it was helping pay for my tuition, my housing. And I just realized I wasn't motivated in the same ways that a lot of my peers were. And so I just wanted to ideologically do something like boots on the ground. Some encounters with crime. I was, going to school in Seattle, and it wasn't like it is now, but the university district was particularly a hub of a lot of people with mental health issues, a lot of, open air drug use. And we saw that pour into kind of the college community housing. My car was broken into several times. House was lit on fire with me and some buddies in it, just a random arsonist. So it was just kind of like enough is enough, right? People are, heckling your friends and, harassing females, and you just want to do something about it. And so I just kind of went for it. Like I didn't really know anyone in it. I was learning how to test for civil service, police, and fire. And ultimately that was a really good time to come in, 2007. A lot of attrition with, the boomers were retiring, and, we still had a lot of troops overseas. And so it was just a really good time for a candidate like myself, kind of figure some things out. Once I figured out what that whole process was like, I got in with my department, and I've been with them since. But, a lot of little things too. I think I've always had this frustration with bullies and people that would victimize others. I was a shy kid. I was a small kid. And so there's a little bit of that. Hey, could I do this? Am I, can I get big and strong enough? All those things.
Yeah. And what's been the most rewarding? Because now, what, you got about 15 or 16 years in?
Yeah, I'm almost at 16.
So what's been the most rewarding part of that decision for you?
It keeps changing for me. I mean, I went after to be honest, kind of like I described, I was a more shy kid. I was academically inclined. I was good at hitting the books. So I actually visualized myself getting into investigations. I'm really analytical.
Yeah.
But then once I started doing the job, I would not prescribe myself as an adrenaline junkie. I wanted that, right? I wanted the chase. I wanted to catch the guys, doing the dangerous stuff. So I got into canine. And so, earlier in my career, I would say, man, I'm doing this real deal. Like, this is almost Hollywood at times. Like, I have the stories and I have the excitement. More recently, like, as I mentioned, I'm in recruiting. It's just been interacting more with the community. Again, just like I never thought I'd be a canine cop and that, hard charging guy that liked to drive fast. That wasn't my reason for getting in. I surprised myself as well. I never thought myself to be the community engagement, smiley PR guy, but I saw the value in that, making these connections, especially post Floyd. It's what our industry needs. Like, not every cop has to do it, but you have to have enough wanting to do it and willing to do it. And even to recognize that, sometimes I have to take a step back and realize I'm humbled, but when people relay that I'm a role model for them, whether they're a young officer or not, that's a big deal for me. I met a candidate who was looking at police service, and he came in and met me, and he was a Hispanic young man. And right away, he's just like, "Oh man, you're Asian and you're a sergeant. That's so cool." And I'm like, "Is it, dude? Like, really?" But, I took a step back. I was like, and I was thinking about my own command structure, and I was thinking about some neighboring command structures. And sure, we have a very diverse area, and there's people of color and in different ranks, but like not a ton, right? And so just for him to take a step back and realize for a moment there's something that he could do because he saw that possibility for himself, like, that was pretty inspiring for me.
I love it. It goes back to what you said before, right? Like, Bruce Lee was somebody that you were like, he looks like me. I could see me, and he's doing this, right? And I think that's what we're missing a lot of times in law enforcement, recruiting, or just anything in society, where if other groups can't see themselves in them,
Mm-hmm.
they don't know it's possible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Go ahead.
My perception and how I relate to just the concept of diversity has changed a lot in my whole life. I'm the son of immigrant parents, and I was one that wanted to assimilate. Like, I wanted to ignore the fact that I looked different. And largely for the majority of my life, I don't feel like I was treated different. So I feel very blessed in that regard. However, to try to ignore and try to act like I'm not what I am or how I look is kind of a confusing thing, I think, for a young man, but not to realize it until years later, right? I love Bruce Lee, and part of that's because, what kid doesn't like, kung fu movies and stuff,
Right.
but, me and my dad watched a lot of them. And so, and then I think there was that subconscious thing, oh, like, this is someone that my dad thinks super cool, and so I think he's super cool. The Ninja Turtles aren't even people, and so, you're trying to look for these little things, and you definitely see it a lot. I think that there's a lot of feelings associated with concepts of diversity. Are we doing too much? And I don't want it to be forced, right? I just try to explain, hey, just it exists here. Let's recognize it and recognize how we feel about it. But I do think it is really cool for kids growing up now that even with travel shows, right, and cooking shows, like, their cuisine of heritage probably isn't so much quote unquote weird. It's something that everyone has seen on TV, so they don't have to be ashamed of it. And I definitely recognize little pieces of that. For me, like, I didn't want my friends to come over and see the rice cooker plugged in on the counter and be weird, right? but truly, like a lot of my friends thought it was cool because they
Right.
wanted to eat that and not the bread that they're bored of. Because it's similar, like I'm bored of the rice, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, all those stereotypes but there's some truth to it and how we kind of navigate things.
Dude, you're so insightful on that. And as I was preparing for this episode, I listened to, a couple of your podcasts, which we'll talk about later. And I love your awareness of the biases, right? And I love your awareness of, okay, are we truly being inclusive? Would everybody feel welcome here?
Mm.
So what, in your view, can we do more of? How do we continue to progress beyond what I would say is surface level, the easy stuff? Like, how do we get to the point where you and I can have dialogue about our differences and love
Yeah.
it?
I think it's just that, like, have dialogue and have like real talk and have uncomfortable conversations sometimes, or check the ego, right? Because if someone hears what I'm saying and then they have, let's say, an Asian or Hispanic friend, or they're African American, they want to ask their white friend some things about their family, to abandon the ego and recognize, hey, that curiosity, someone might take as racist, right? Because, oh, you assume my family is different. It's like, no, this is me trying to be more culturally
Mm,
competent. I don't know, because right, like that example might be like me from 15 years ago or 25 years ago, where I'm like, I'm not different than you. Why would you treat me as such, or why would you assume that? But truly, it's just trying to learn about people. So I think if we are just people learning about people, that's going to help go a long ways. You generally see a lot of people that do work alongside or live alongside people that come from different walks, and they just get it better, right? They just have that awareness. I do listen to different things. I try to expose myself to different ideas, podcasts, internet, YouTube. I think it's all
right.
amazing resources now. A lot of us have had those kind of cookie cutter diversity trainings, usually through our workplace.
Yep.
And we know that it's generally not received super well because people get defensive and the content may or may not be great. But I think just to expose yourself to more and just, remove the ego, remove judgment. If you feel yourself getting defensive, ask why. And then generally, I think that, as long as we're just open, we can get there.
Yeah, I think something you said that really strikes a chord and I love is just remember behind everything is a person. Like we're all
Mhm.
human,
Yeah.
which means we're imperfect. Like if there's one thing we all have in common, it's that none of us are perfect.
Absolutely. And I think, in that vein and with my job, the biggest bias that I had in the longest one that took time to recognize even, and then try to course correct to some degree was, people that break the law, right? Like I grew up pretty goody two shoes, traditional family, right? So like you do not mess up. You don't even get bad grades, right? That stuff was real. Like I grew
Right.
up with that. So to fathom like, getting caught or arrested for something, and so here I am as like a 22-year-old kid, right? Telling people how they ought to live their lives, and the value judgment, right? And you do your best as a cop. You're trying to do some mediation, and even outside of just being immature or whatnot for a young cop. And this is a gross generalization, but for
Yeah.
me, I'm trying to tell people how to manage their domestic arguments, and trying to coach them on, hey, maybe take a walk, or have you thought about getting a mediator? And they're looking at me like, when I was 22, I probably looked like I was 17. At least I heard it a lot, so I believe it enough.
Right.
Um, but just yeah, from what place, what wisdom did I have to impart any of that? But for sure, when I was arresting people, especially when they ran, especially when they fought, you're a bad person. Like, why would you try to hurt me? Like, why would you try to get away? Like, just own it. Like, after a number of years, and I recognize, like, yeah, people are people, and I think that when I really reflect on how we all make mistakes and whether or not we got caught for them has something to do with how it pans out, whether or not we were supported in or out, or why, the context. Yeah, man, like when I started talking to people, like people, suspects, people I arrested, like I could tell quickly they felt that they were looked at as a person, and they would actually talk to me, right? And it wasn't always for like a statement, for the
Yeah.
case, and sometimes it was just for relations, right? And it always served as a really strong compliment, and I think that a lot of cops, this will resonate with them. But when they say, hey, you never did me wrong, or you yeah, you at this PD have never done me wrong. and they'll cite some other department that,
Yeah.
that put the thumping on them. But they say, yeah, you guys never did me dirty. And I was like, okay, that means you're treated like a real person.
For
And
sure.
that's a huge thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? We spend so much of our time for law enforcement professionals training for all the threats in the world, and they're very real. Like, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, they're very real,
Hmm.
but we don't do a good enough job balancing out, recognizing when they're there and when they're not, being able to transition
Hmm.
to the human interaction, the actual human interaction that needs to take place to allow people to feel just like you said, like they were valued, they were heard, because even the people you're arresting have value to somebody in the world,
Absolutely.
right? And that's, I think, along with what you're talking about recruiting and some of the stuff you're doing, one of the things we've really got to challenge is how do we train and prepare our young men and women in this line of work to be ready to win the physical encounters, be
Hmm.
absolutely hands down prepared to win fights, but also be dialed in enough to recognize when that is not taking place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's solid training, right? It's visualization, it's practical, like hands-on training. You talk about stress inoculation. All these things help. I think when we see a lot of these unfortunate events unfold on camera, and this is not to disparage people at all, we have to learn from our
Mm-hmm.
collective mistakes or
For
missteps.
sure.
Is you can see that stress overwhelm, right? You can see that condition black that we call it in the profession, where you know their judgment is not that they're not perceiving things or they're focusing on the wrong things. um, and you can't, some people are better at it than others, just like any other skill, but it is a skill. And so you need to train it, and you can't, I mean, man, as training is tough, your staffing is depleted and now more than ever. So I know it's pretty commonplace that training hours are not getting fulfilled to the level where we love them to, but we need to, right? It's absolutely imperative.
Yeah, if you don't make training a priority, then quite honestly, to me, you're making failure, you're making coming up short
Hmm.
a priority,
Hmm.
right? Because training is what prevents you from losing,
Yeah. And it's all kinds of training. And like
for sure.
do I fervently believe that if a cop is in shape and emotionally uh has a safe place to be, like the home is a safe place for them to actually recoup and feel supported, and they come back to work, will they handle that stressful incident better? Yes. Like, I mean, there's so much data and research about, your
Mm-hmm.
physiological shape and just how you're gonna your mental performance and optimization. Like, if we treat ourselves more like athletes to reduce stress in other walks and other veins that we could, how are we mitigating that to ensure reliable performance? Because we all know the stakes can be extremely high.
Yeah, they are. They're extremely high for a short period of time.
Hmm.
So you have to be ready.
Absolutely.
And when we don't train, whether through the agency or on our own,
Hmm.
we're literally rolling the dice that tonight's not the night that we're going to be tested.
Yeah.
And that's unacceptable, right? It's unacceptable for you as an officer. It's unacceptable for me as your partner. It's unacceptable for either of us, for the community. Because what I
Yep.
always tell people, especially my young cops, when I get to talk to them, what I tell them is the community doesn't get to call 911 and see you show up at the door and go, I'd like a refund. Can you send somebody that's in shape and ready?
Hmm.
Right? They just get you. So
Yeah.
you owe it to them to
Hmm.
show up ready to go.
Absolutely. It's like you call the plumber and they show up with like half their tools. Like, they're like, well, I know this is leaking, but this is all I got. So we're gonna duct
Yeah.
tape this thing. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't work.
No, man, no good. All right, I wanted to go in as I was researching this. I saw a couple things that struck my interest to ask you.
Yeah.
One was a quote you had about flexibility and purpose, and you said you continue to explore what is resonating with me, meaning you, in your stage of life and career. Talk to me about giving yourself flexibility and purpose and allowing it to change as you grow.
Yeah, I mean, when you recap that, I think about just my example of, career, like what I wanted in my job and what I thought I needed to fulfill as far as developing myself as a cop, as a man, all these things. But purpose, yeah, it continues to change because we're not the same people we were. I mean, yesterday or a year ago, certainly 5, 10 years ago. We shouldn't be, right? We should be continuing to grow and challenge ourselves. So if our purpose is too narrow, then we suffer a lot of potential consequences of that, right? We paint ourselves into a lane. We limit our own opportunities, or of our focus, and we focus on this one goal. And there might be external factors that make it near impossible, or maybe not practical to achieve without sacrificing a lot of other things in your job or personal life. Then you're kind of at a loss, right? And so I think that there could be danger with, especially those really driven people, if they paint themselves into a lane or a specific mission too tightly. So maybe to think broadly, and that's what I'm trying to get at.
I love it. And allow yourself to grow into your new role, right? Like, because now, like you said, we all grow. And if I only look back on what I wanted back when I was 18-year-old me, well, it's easy for my current me to be like, that was a failure because I didn't accomplish that.
Yeah.
Instead, I'm missing all the abundances around me and all the new opportunities I have to grow into new purpose. And I think that's where people struggle. They think this purpose is some defined thing that never changes. And what I would argue with is it should always be growing with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious when I wrote that now, because I'd since pretty recently, so I don't know if it's since or not, but listen to a podcast with Emmanuel Akko. Are you familiar with that name?
I don't know.
He was an NFL player, and then he was a commentator, and he had a segment called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. And that's where I first got exposure to him, because I'm not a sports guy. But he was talking about how he hates goals, and how the reason being is that you have a couple scenarios. One is that you achieve the goal and then you're at a loss, right? So he cited a lot of Olympic athletes and professional athletes where they had the goal, they won the thing, right? Maybe they got gold and then they're at a loss. And you see that in depression. You see they actually lose their purpose because their purpose wasn't flexible or broad enough, right? Where he is a fan of objectives, whereas it would be, I'm going to be the best athlete. Yeah, it involves this goal where I'll do the best I can to get gold, and then I need to do this, and then I need to grow in this way. Your goals, you either succeed or you fail, right? So the converse being, you medal as a silver, and now are you depressed, and now are you at a loss again because you didn't get your goal? And so I think it's a little nuanced. I think it could be semantics for some people when they hear that back, but yeah. I like what he's getting at, right? When we question what we're doing and why we're doing it, I think it's worth examining.
I love it. Yeah, no, I get it, and I agree. And I just always want people to remember that what you are doing is exactly that. It's what you are doing. It's not who you are.
Yeah.
Right? And it's so easy in today's world to lose ourselves in the what. What have I accomplished? What have I obtained? What car do I have in my driveway? How big is my house? The reality is that's not who you are.
Yeah.
Right? Who you are is a husband, a dad, a brother, a mom, an aunt, all of that. That's who you are. Who you are is the values you show up with, the integrity you bring, the life you bring, the energy you bring.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's your values. It's how you treat people. It's what your legacy is and what people remember about you. That's dangerous, how much we identify with our jobs. And I think most everyone can identify with that, and they may be able to perceive, even if they're not a first responder, how much that can be, because it does affect a lot of your life outside of when you're wearing the uniform. Absolutely. It's a very friend of mine, because my daughter just turned 4, and so she, for her whole life, as soon as she could talk and we were learning about jobs and books and things, and we would just try to encourage her and just see like where her interests were, right? We'd say, hey, like, you saw that on TV. Like, what do you think? That could be a job. You can cook food as a job. Do you want to be a chef? And she'd be like, no. And it became quickly, for like the last 2 years, everything you ask her, she says no. And then with my wife, I was like, I think we should stop asking her what she wants to be when she grows up, right? Because you ask teenagers, they don't know. You ask college students, they don't know. You ask,
right.
Half 30-year-olds don't know, right? They have a job probably, but they don't know what they want to do in 2 years, and the way that things are going. Yeah, you career change. So to make that less of our identity, and maybe like just say like, hey, what kind of person do you want to be? Like, hey, what do you want to be? What do you want to do like for your free time? Like, what really do you love doing this? Do you love painting? Do you want to keep painting your whole life? Like, does that bring you joy? Like maybe these things, like
Yeah,
more integral to who you are.
for sure. And that's honestly, that's what I tell parents when I get to talk with them is don't ask your kids what they want to do. Ask them who do they want to be.
Yeah, I
Who
love
do you?
that.
Because that's way more important. Because what you are can change. What you're
Hmm.
doing, but it's who you are that is the consistent that's always with you. So yeah, I 100% agree with that. Talk to me about this one. Legacy is giving, and you create legacy by your daily actions.
Mm. Yeah, it's just to recognize like everything you do, has a ripple effect, right? Um, and to not get lost in the weeds. And I think a lot of my writing has been, or a lot of my posts, a lot of this whole thing that I do with Blue Grit has been out of certain things that I'm frustrated about, right? So it's trying to make something productive out of it and an outlet and be positive and think about how you can use that energy and that momentum to build something good. And so with that, it's an invitation to say like, hey, whatever the situation is, whatever you're looking at right now, like there's something you can do. And it might feel daunting, it might feel overwhelming, but there's something you can do that will pay into something um, more productive or more positive. And people are watching, right? People, you're always interacting with someone. What you are or aren't doing, someone's taking note.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're always you're setting an example for somebody all the time. So talk to me about. So let's go into the Blue Grit. You got Blue Grit Wellness, and you got your Blue Grit Radio podcast. Where did that come from, and what was your biggest obstacle that you had to overcome to putting yourself forward like that?
Yeah, I mean, what it came out of was essentially, as I started talking about posting on social media, I recognized a couple things. One is that I felt that I felt like I was at that time in my career and at my place in life where I felt okay, just kind of just being open and saying, "Hey, I'm a cop and this is me." I felt like that was very helpful when people do that. I'm certainly one of many, and I no judgment for those that don't. I think absolutely there's a lot of people for their professional or personal reasons you should not. But for me, I felt like I was there. At the same time, I was just trying to spread stuff that I cared about, which is fitness and mental health awareness. I've been an avid peer support, uh, I guess, team member, but also advocate in my own department for most of my career. So just relaying all these little nuggets and then at the same time trying to gain some sense of confidence that I had a voice and I had something that was worth talking about that wasn't solely police work. It's very in tandem, and that's where a lot of my experience and insight comes from is the front line of being a first responder and why, I mean, truly why I even care about a lot of this and why I know so much about it and took the deep dive into these topics is because of that. I didn't grow up playing sports or anything, but the physical health and fitness thing is something that I recognized how imperative it is in the job. And so, with that recognition of planning, as a sergeant, I was telling all my guys they needed to have a backup plan and they needed to find what made them excited, what made them what they felt passionately about outside of police work, because you never know.
Yeah.
It might be your choice, it may not. And I'd always said that I preached that for years, even before 2020, but I didn't really do it for myself. I always had these vague, maybe I'll go back to school, but for what? I don't know. I
Yeah.
didn't really hold myself accountable, that classic, not taking your own advice. So I
Yeah.
was like, well, I do care about this. I do care about coaching, and maybe fitness, maybe health could be an avenue for that. And so if you look way back, a lot of my original like Instagram was more in the workouts and some health information and some nutrition information. And then now it's just kind of developed into what my 40 plus hours a week is, which is more just recruiting and mindset for being a cop and my opinions and my perspectives on police culture and as it interfaces with the community. So yeah, it's I think there's another part of your question in there that I might be missing.
No, you're good. What's been the reaction for it? How's it been received?
It's hard to say. You, I mean, certain aspects are easy to say. Some people are pretty direct and be very complimentary, very validating. Um, I think it's just that kind of imposter syndrome that a lot of us deal with, where when I'm hearing only good things, I'm like, okay, where's the bad stuff, right? Had a couple, trolls here and there, but nothing crazy. Um, so then I'm always wondering, okay, what do people really think? You know, people in my department, like people in my, my personal life. Um, do they think that I'm some weirdo or I'm like trying to be like an influencer and I think I have an inflated ego? And I'm like, I can't worry about that. I just try to worry about why I'm doing it and what I'm saying. And if it's helpful to people, like that's my real goal.
What's been your favorite moment so far since you started creating? Because you're pretty, what I'd say you're pretty loud on your social media. You put out a lot of good stuff, but it's very in the law enforcement realm,
Yeah.
which some people love, some people aren't going to like. What's
Hmm.
been your best moment so far? What's for you?
I don't know if I can isolate a moment, but just being able to connect, like we were talking before, but uh, I how else would I have met you and gotten to have this fantastic conversation about life and purpose? I don't know. It's just like we talk about all the ills of social media and the type of age we're in, but at the same time, like I can count quickly, like 2 dozen people that I would have never met that I've either had a dynamic conversation with, whether recorded or not recorded, or just messaging, and I feel part of this other community that spans state lines, spans country borders, and just people that really, really care deeply for other people, and then just wanting to put out a positive message. Like I feel like iron sharpens iron, and in my own neighborhood, certainly I have a lot of people that I really respect and I look up to, but not necessarily doing things the same way, not necessarily like doing a podcast or talking about these things publicly. So yeah, just to feel that connectedness and just be inspired by what other people are doing.
Yeah, dude, it's amazing how good it feels when you give to others,
Mm,
right? And the law of the
yeah.
universe says it's going to reciprocate, right? If you're putting love and positivity and hope out to the world, it's going to come back to you.
Hmm.
Whereas if you use your social media channels or your conversations to inspire divisiveness, hate, and be derogatory, then that's your world.
Yeah. Yeah, you curate that, right? Like we choose what affects us, and then now with algorithms, it's almost going to pile that on, right? Like, oh, you like this stuff, you like this controversy, that's all you're going to see. Then we're
let's
going to send it your way.
yeah, let's keep
Um,
feeding you. That's what they're gonna do, right?
yeah, yeah. Clay Surratt is one that he's out in Virginia. He's a veteran, and he has a very civilian life and job. But I don't know. I'm curious if he'd ever give me a peek into his schedule because he volunteers, he coaches, and he works with all these different foundations that help cops and veterans, do BJJ and do athletic training. And he's just such a giver. He's such a figure as I see it from my purview. Um, and I kind of asked him about that busyness, and our episode hasn't aired yet, but it's going to be early July. But um, so it actually will have aired by the time this is out.
Yeah,
Um,
right about the
so
same
check it
time.
out, guys. Yeah. So, but his thing was, yeah, exactly what you said. He's like, giving is the best medicine, right? Serving others is the best medicine for your own stuff. Like if you're hurting, if you're working through some stuff, if you connect and you pay it forward, like it'll pay back.
Love it.
Um, I absolutely agree with that. I do add an asterisk to say some people are the consummate caretakers that aren't flipping it back on themselves. And so there is sometimes you have to be wary of that, or we have to be wary of that for others.
Yeah, I mean, there's always boundaries and self awareness and reflection that needs to take place. But I think, just like you said, giving will reciprocate.
Hmm.
There's only so
Absolutely.
much taking you can do in the world. And then eventually you've taken from everything around you. There's no more to take. What are you going to do?
Hmm.
Right? You're at the end of the road. So where can our audience follow you, Eric, and continue to support you and your mission? I love tying physical fitness and mental health all in the same package because anybody that listens to me, I tell you the same thing over and over. You work on your physical body, you got to work on your mental. Like they both need exercising,
Hmm.
right? One of the ways I tell people, like, well, how do I exercise my mind? Be curious. That's the first one. Be curious. Ask questions. Want to learn something.
Yeah.
Quit with the already, like you said earlier, cops want to do the same thing they've always done the same way forever because they like it. Well, quit.
Hmm.
Like, go find something new to learn. So I love the message, and you're tying that together. And where do you want our audience to connect with you further, Eric?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram. It's Blue Grit Wellness, all one word together. Same tag, same handle on TikTok now. It's like a new page. I just trying that out. And the Blue Grit Radio, right? So that's my podcast. Amazon, Spotify.
Nice. How's
Apple.
that been going for you?
It's been good. And like I said, it's just been, I was talking yesterday. I interviewed one of my old supervisors and training officer, and he asked the same thing. And I was like, man, like so good, because selfishly, there's so many benefits I'm getting from. I get to pick his brain and revisit, go down memory lane a little bit, and then really ask him some more critical, leadership advice, essentially for myself, right? Because he did a lot of things. Now he's hung it up. He's retired, and I got to pick his brain because I wasn't even at a developmental stage to do it, 10 years ago when we were working together. Whereas now it's like, without the podcast, I don't know that I would have, had an hour and a half long conversation with him where we sat down, we were dedicated, focused, and then to be able to share that out and know that a lot of people that I work with or worked in the area or people that he's trained nationally, like, are going to be able to hear that conversation and pay that intelligence and that wisdom forward, is so huge. So it's been an amazing gift.
I love it, dude. And that's so funny you say that, because I was just talking to somebody a couple of days ago, and one of the things that I love about the podcast is you are creating a place where stories can live for as infinitely long as we have podcasts. Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. Yeah. Because I started originally with a couple guys that I used to work with. And part of my pitch is like, yeah, it's kind of like a conversation, because one was like totally in, and the second one was like, sure, if he did it, then I'll do it. I was like, dude, where else are you going to have, like, our memories of these things we're going to talk about are going to be worse in 3, 5, 10, 15 years. Like, we'll have this forever, if nothing else, even if no one listens. Yeah. Or it's like, or our kids, our daughters can listen to this and hear a little bit, like, get this little perspective into what we were like or what we were talking about and what that was like. It's just a crazy age. And I think with all the scary things happening, there's a lot of amazing things happening if we, use it the right way.
For sure. Eric, it was such an honor to have you on the show, my friend. I appreciate your time, and you keep up the good work out there. The world needs more of it, my friend.
Yeah. Thanks so much, man. It's my pleasure.
And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We will see you all again next week.